need it. Oh, me! See it happen on CVM TV. I'm out.
Tonight, the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority bill arrives in the Senate. But before the upper house votes, the Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement, JABEM, warns that NARA contains mechanisms to permanently strip Jamaicans of their customary rights to the beach. We examine the specific provisions and the legal arguments. Also tonight, the Cybercrimes Amendment Act passed the Jamaican Senate today. It's now pretty much law. So we ask, is the public better protected, and are the institutions asked to enforce the law ready to do so? Then more than 30,000 grade 6 students sat the Primary Exit Profile PEP this week. The ministry calls it a success. Tonight we ask the principals and coordinators in the rooms, does that word, success, tell the whole story? And a free medical mission in Petersfield, Westmoreland tomorrow. In a community still rebuilding from Hurricane Melissa, who is making sure Jamaicans are not neglecting their health in the rush to rebuild their homes? I'm Jody Ann Quarry, and this is Lead Story. The National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority Bill, NARA, passed the House of Representatives in the early hours of Wednesday morning, April 29. The vote was 31 to 15. 16 lawmakers were absent. More than 20 amendments were debated, but not one proposed by the opposition was accepted in the lower house. The bill now sits before the Senate. The government's case is straightforward. Hurricane Melissa caused an estimated 12.2 billion United States dollars in damage. More than 215,000 structures were affected. Jamaica, they said, cannot afford the pace of ordinary bureaucracy. NARA is a mechanism to move at the speed the damage demands. Let's take a look at this afternoon's sitting of the Senate.
The provisions in Section 21, Sections 21 to 24, have definitely been mischaracterized in some of the public commentary. Yeah. The ministerial direction powers in this bill are not a blanket override of every regulatory authority in Jamaica. Allow me to explain how these provisions work, because the step-in order is not a first resort. It is, in fact, a last resort. And there are multiple procedural hurdles that must be crossed before it can be used. First, there must be independent technical advice. Independent technical advice. Where a regulatory body has not acted within the timeline required for reconstruction to proceed, the minister may issue a formal direction requiring that body to act within a specified period. But that direction must be based on independent technical advice. They're not just getting up and saying, oh, let me approve this. They have to have independent technical advice. And so this would include environmental and safety concerns that may have been identified and communicated. So the regulatory body is never going to be silenced. It is being required to act on what it already knows within a reasonable time. The second is notification and opportunity to respond. Before a direction takes effect, the regulatory body must be notified and given an opportunity to explain why it has not acted and what outstanding issues remain. If those issues are substantive, for example, if the environmental authority has identified a genuine environmental risk, if the planning authority has identified a genuine safety concern, those concerns must be addressed before the direction is enforced. The direction power is not a mechanism to override a regulatory body that has acted and said no on legitimate grounds. Only when all of those steps have been exhausted. Independent technical advice, formal direction, notification, opportunity to respond, failure to act, does the step-in order become available.
And that's Senator Dana Morris Dixon this afternoon inside the Senate as the discussions on the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority NAR Bill began. It wasn't completed today. It will complete or continue at least into the next sitting of the Senate. But this morning, the Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement indicated something urgent to the nation. Their argument is this: that NARA, as written, will constructively incapacitate prescriptive rights. Those are the customary rights that ordinary Jamaicans and fishing communities have relied on for generations to access and use their beaches. The legal foundation for those rights is the Prescription Act of 1882. And JABEM is currently collaborating with vulnerable communities on not one, not two, but 5 active legal cases in the courts defending access to beaches against the government agencies and private landowners that may want to utilize them. Every one of these cases is grounded in the Prescription Act of 1882. So tonight, as we look at NARA now making its way through the Senate and the concerns that are being raised, we're joined by Dr. Devin Taylor, president of the Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement, JABEM. Hi, Dr. Taylor, and welcome.
Greetings. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Taylor, JABEM's brief argues that NARA will constructively incapacitate prescriptive rights under the Prescription Act of 1882. Before we get to the bill, what legal protection does that piece of legislation, the Prescription Act, ordinarily give Jamaicans that have been accessing beaches for generations?
Yes. So the Prescription Act of 1882, which is the dominant piece of legislative framework that we are using, is grounded in the customary right of the Jamaican people to continue to access their beaches. As a matter of fact, it is the legislation that the Beach Control Act of 1956 points to as the tool that we can use to secure our common law rights. And so that is the tool we are using, and that tool is under threat by the way our NARA is constructed. And so we have to point that out to the nation, because the different mechanism in NARA are the same mechanism that are present in the Beach Control Act of 1956 that the government does not use. You do not see the government out there protecting people's beach access rights. You see JABEM doing that because the government have failed to actually step in and protect the people when the NRCA should be doing its job. It is not. So we do see NARA is going to operate in a similar context, that even though I just heard the minister talk about that these measures will not be the first go-to. But I mean, they will not be the second go-to, the third go-to either. right? They will be the tools that we'll use, because this bill is about acceleration, moving at speed, fast, getting these jobs done. And prescriptive rights is something that you develop over 20 years. It's a slow process as you walk through the court to secure your rights. And so we are in a space right now where we know that they will violate our prescriptive rights, because it is happening right now. We have the UDC in court, government statutory body. We have the Commissioner of Land, government statutory body. We have the Airport Authority, government statutory body. We have the Portland Municipal Corporation. So the government can say what it can say, but the lived reality of the Jamaican people is that it does not stand up for us as it relates to beach access.
Dr. Taylor, this week, Jamaica's Constitutional Court, the full court, ruled that a minister cannot override a technical regulatory body without evidence-based justification. That was the Bengal Dry Harbour Mountains ruling. Does the judgment have any direct relevance to the legal arguments against NARA stepping and ministerial powers and the things that you're complaining of tonight?
It does, and we're happy with that ruling, because it shows that, the environment has value and people's rights has value. So we know that we will challenge NARA if NARA tries to, hurt our community. And we will challenge NARA if these amendments are not made in the interest of the Jamaican people. So we are prepared to move into judicial review mode. We are prepared to move into constitutional protection mode, but we are giving the government an opportunity to amend NARA so it does not violate the Prescription Act of 1882. NARA does not even mention that piece of legislation, and most of NARA's project will be coastal projects. It's the coastline starting from St. Elizabeth within Black River. You come into Hanover, you go into Montego Bay, you go into Falmouth. Majority of these projects are coastal projects, and the entire coastline along these spaces are occupied by fisher folks and also by community rights to it. So therefore, the Prescription Act will be the major tool that stands to be violated, and it is the only one that is remain that the people can use to protect their rights to the coast. This is why we're using it. So if NARA was pro-people, if NARA was pro, rights, it would take into consideration people's prescriptive rights, and nothing has been said about prescription rights in NARA, and we're asking them to make that amendment. Otherwise, we're going to be locked in legal fights, and they may not be able to move fast, because we, the Jamaican people, are not going to surrender the coastline.
Dr. Devon Taylor, president of the Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement. Thank you so much for joining us this evening inside Lead Story, helping us better understand the concerns and giving the senators who now have the bill before them more to consider as amendments might be taken there when the House, or rather when the Senate takes a look at this piece of legislation. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up,
Thank you.
The Cybercrimes Amendment Act passed the Senate today without a single amendment. Another piece of legislation that's now law. Is the public better protected, and are the institutions asked to enforce this law ready? We ask a privacy practitioner when we return.
Every day we use our feet to walk, run, and take us places. But your feet can do something even more amazing. Join Guardian Group's Shine 5K Night Run Walk and make a stride to support KPH, the Falmouth Hospital, and Project STAR. Saturday, May 23 in Kingston and Saturday, May 30 in Montego Bay. Register at run2shineja.com or runningeventsja.com and see you at Guardian Group's Shine 5K Night Run Walk.
Brilliant. Worth every penny. Holland into a rally.
It's a step over there. He walks past him, and then it's just a bit of magic.
Opening up for a shot for Moises Caicedo. The unthinkable
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is...
Hi, I am Candy Pang.
Watagwan.
Watagwan.
Datagwan.
Watagwan. Watagwan.
Watagwan. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
Datagwan for Watagwan.
It was a busy day for the Senate today because earlier the Jamaican Senate passed the Cybercrimes Amendment Act into law. The bill was taken through the committee stage, clause by clause. That took about 30 seconds. And by the whole Senate, it passed without amendment. They went through the entire process today, debates, everything. Then it received its third reading. That's how a bill becomes a law. And I'm telling you, that took 30 seconds as well. Passed without amendment. And with that swift process, after a long debate today, Jamaica now has an amended cybercrime framework on the statute books. What that framework contains: a new offence for knowingly allowing premises to be used for cybercrime, carrying penalties up to 15 years. A clause 6, criminalizes the manufacture, distribution and possession of hacking tools with criminal intent. Child protection provisions have been strengthened with harsher penalties for offences targeting minors. And the Senate today also heard a call from one senator, Senator Alan Bernard, for mandatory body-worn cameras for police. A signal that on the very day this law has passed, senators were themselves identifying accountability gaps in the enforcement infrastructure that will be asked to implement it. Now, what the law does not expressly address, it doesn't talk about things like artificial intelligence-generated content, deep fakes, forged digital documents. The government's position has been that the act is technologically neutral, and it doesn't name specific technologies because technologies, they change, and they change so quickly. And the framework can accommodate new threats without naming them. Let's hear from Senator Kimina Johnson-Smith, responsible for taking this piece of legislation through the Senate today.
I also want to perhaps start with the issue of the inclusion of AI, the recommended inclusion of AI. And just to say, so the discussion which Senator Scott Motley may have had with Minister Wheatley would have to be nuanced in the fact that there is a council that has been established. It is reviewing, and the review which I referred to in my intervention as well, that has to be ongoing, will take into consideration offenses which may be manifest by artificial intelligence to verify that they are either already addressed in the bill or require further work. So that review is being done because it's not established that they won't be addressed. We had actually started that. Right. Right. No, because there's a review, because they want to verify that what the bill has is sufficient or is not. So the conclusion has not yet been drawn. The work is underway. But what the intention, so far as I understand, what is not the intention is to start to make the bill technology specific. So while I understand the emotional response to saying that if AI is not stated in the bill, then it cannot deal with AI offenses, I want to assure that there is actually not yours, not your intervention. Senator Small Ferguson had specifically said that he thought that AI should be referenced in the bill.
And that gives you a taste of some of the discussion that took place in the Senate today. That was Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith there talking about the amendment to the Cybercrimes Act. But the opposition raised a concern that the Senate didn't resolve through the amendment today, that the Joint Select Committee recommendations on which this law is based were completed in 2023. 3 years passed before the bill reached Parliament. And in those 3 years, artificial intelligence, deep fakes, synthetic media, and online extortion scaled in ways no committee report from the first half of 2023 could have fully anticipated. The law is now enacted. The question tonight is no longer what Parliament should do. We're past that stage. The question is now what Parliament has done. Is that sufficient? And whether the institutions asked to enforce this law are ready to do so. We're joined tonight by Chuck Cameron, attorney at law and privacy practitioner. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Inside Lead Story, you're here now. You're looking at this piece of legislation. 2023 Joint Select Committee passed the House earlier this year, now has made its way through the Senate. At the end of all of this, is Jamaica better protected this evening than it was this morning?
Yes, it is. And I'm happy how you spoke about identifying that senators were now raising the question of accountability of the state and how we use powers, because for me, that is one of the biggest wins coming out of the amendments that's not spoken to. And that win is where the legislation now requires the police commissioner to develop a protocol for police officers to follow in conducting searches of computers and mobile devices. And that actually flowed from that there was a case before the Constitutional Court where the Constitutional Court, in my mind, failed to address the substantial harm that Jamaican citizens are being exposed to. The police force now, through this legislation, is now to develop a protocol that police officers will follow. What does that mean? Right now, the first thing police do as their primary means of investigation is take your phone and go through it. And that is a critical piece of intelligence gathering.
Is this coming out as well from the Sean Campbell and others case, the Vibes Cartel case that most people would have known it as, where this issue of telecommunications was brought all the way to the Privy Council? They didn't have to rule on that in order to make the substantive rulings, but for many attorneys, they saw this as a key issue that did need to be reflected in our legislation.
So that really raised the evidential chain of burden. But this one more speaks to the Amar-Leon Issa case, really speaks to your constitutional right to informational privacy. So
before you get to what evidence you get from my phone, can you even open and use my phone? Can you open and take information from my phone?
How you go about taking information from your phone. So that was a big win coming out. That's not headline news, so it hasn't been spoken about, but that is one of the biggest wins for accountability and how do Jamaican citizens hold the state accountable. In terms of children, a strong, as I heard the senator say earlier, a strong policy message was sent in that we have to protect children, especially in this new era. The question is, while they raised the ceiling so high, they didn't change a lot of the other penalties that come in at 2 years, but this one is so far out there now. 20 years, it really sends a positive message. It opens up the concept of what sharing these intimate images and who is responsible for it. A similar discussion we had the other evening.
And this is him referencing Lead Story Prime and us talking about protection of children and the kind of information that is shared to and with children and shared by them and the kind of protections that they should expect.
Following on, the law now makes it a criminal offense to publish the information. So no longer is it only an offense to share it with another individual, but when you publish it, what must happen, however, in relation to that publishing, and now you are making landlords or Airbnb owners accountable, the government must mount an extensive public awareness campaign because it cannot be these innocuous acts or these acts that they may not necessarily appreciate carry criminal sanction.
Sharing this information, what does that mean? Why would an Airbnb or a landlord get involved in this?
So this is where the legislation now holds a landlord or somebody who, the owner of a property, accountable if someone within their premises is conducting some type of cybercrime. So that one is a tall order, but people must be aware about it. And the danger is, well, the danger is that you can be charged, you now have to find an attorney and mount a defense. It is an obligation of the government to make all owners of property aware of this.
Aware of their criminal liability, aware of the risks to whom they lend spaces to, rent spaces to, allow to occupy even their homes as guests.
Correct.
If they're coming into those spaces. That then is such a serious issue. Another issue though that has been raised is the technological neutrality of this piece of legislation. You heard Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith saying the law is technologically neutral. It doesn't talk about artificial intelligence by name, deepfake, synthetic media, arguing that the government says that the framework can capture those harms anyway. You're an attorney, you're in this space. Does that argument hold when a case actually reaches court?
Yes, it does, and I embrace that 100%. But again, you ask the right question: does it necessarily hold? Not necessarily all the time, but that is the right approach, because AI, the development of AI is happening so fast. What if they were to legislate this to be an offense, that to be an offense, and between yesterday and today, something else came up?
So we have, for example, the new model from Anthropic that is now making it so incredibly difficult for banks around the world. Between 1 month and the next, then, we can have massive leaps in this. Crimes we couldn't think of in January could now be regular things in December.
And if it's not prescribed, you can get away with it. So from a legislative point of view, I embrace that position 100%. It must be agnostic. It begs the question, though, how often do we review legislation?
Well, the government has committed to reviewing cybercrime legislation more frequently going forward. The House made that commitment in February. It wasn't converted into something binding into this piece of legislation today, though. What does that mean? Because it sounds nice when you say it. Nothing in this legislation says we have to come back to it every 6 months.
6 months may be a bit much, but
a year, 2 years.
A year, well, it has to be legislated, it has to be mandated, because there will always be competing priorities. So when you have something that there's a law that says you must do something as opposed to a nice to do, we know what choice is going to be made.
And nice to do doesn't move us as much as we would love to see in this country. Quickly before we go, you had spoken about that accountability discussion that was raised. Senator Alan Bernard talked about it, asking for mandatory body-worn cameras for police officers. This is now on the day the Cybercrime Act is enacted. The Senate is simultaneously seeing accountability gaps and calling them out. When they're talking about the enforcement infrastructure that will be asked to implement it, what does that mean for you to hear that side by side today?
On a positive outcome, there's an appreciation of a thread that binds all these separate pieces of legislation together, and understanding that we live in a complete world. We don't live in silos. So I am happy that the issues are being put on the table at the same time. The substantive issue itself, though, whether or not body-worn cameras will be mandatory, that is strictly a decision for the police force.
Well, it's certainly one that has generated quite a lot of concern. We heard from Minister of National Security and Peace saying that the uniforms that the officers are again wearing after a change already, because uniforms were inappropriate, still now up for review. So this is a discussion that we have to have, but this piece of legislation passing today, big news for Jamaica. And we just heard from Chuck Cameron letting us know that we are better and safer this evening than we were this morning, thanks to its passage. Chuck Cameron, a privacy practitioner and attorney at law, thank you so very much for joining us.
My pleasure as usual.
Lead story. All right, still ahead. More than 31,000 grade 6 students sat the primary exit profile PEP exam this week. The Ministry of Education says the exams were successfully administered. Tonight, we hear from two educators who were in the room. Their assessment may be more complicated than the official statement suggests. That conversation when we return.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Every dream conquered is another dream game. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction. 'Cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people that I say we are mash up the night. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't put it down. Shine your lights on.
On Wednesday and Thursday of this week, 31,806 grade 6 students across Jamaica sat teeny tiny people hard exams, 2026 primary exit profile PEP examinations. The Ministry of Education has issued a statement. It described the sitting as successfully administered. It cited careful planning, inclusive policies, and adaptive strategies. The ministry isn't wrong, though, to say that adjustments were made. They were. Performance tasks were cancelled. Science and social studies were removed from the grade 6 assessment. The curriculum itself was revised for grades 1 through 9. The grade 9 achievement test for 2026 has been suspended entirely. 615 students received special accommodations. Temporary weather-resistant structures were deployed where school relocation was not feasible. And yet, the acting principal of Giddy Hall Primary in St. Elizabeth told the Gleaner this week, we still don't have any roof, so I have to dismiss them very early when I see it setting up to rain. Those students, under tarpaulin, without electricity, in a parish among the hardest hit by the Hurricane Melissa last October, sat the same national assessment on the same days as students in Kingston, in those schools where teachers gave up their Easter holidays to run extra preparation sessions. So tonight we're not looking at whether successful administration of the exams took place. The question is whether the results, when they come, will be read with an understanding of the conditions under which they were produced. Tonight, we're joined by Calvin Harris, principal of Marley Mount Primary School, and Michelle Russell, grade 6 coordinator at St. Aloysius Primary School. Good evening to you both. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good evening.
All right.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us. Calvin Harris, first off, talk to us about where your school is located on the island.
So Marley Mount Primary is on the outskirts of Old Harbour, just about 3 kilometers away from the town center. So we're actually in St. Catherine.
In St. Catherine, were you impacted or affected by Hurricane Melissa last year?
Not, we're not significantly impacted. Just a few. We had minor challenges, but it went well for the most part. So we didn't have much challenges in that regard.
I think that's so important for us to state. The ministry has described the 2026 PEP exams as successfully administered. As a principal whose students sat those exams, does that phrase, successfully administered, capture the full picture of what your school community experienced?
Yes, I must commend the Ministry of Education for the administration or supervising the administration of the examinations. I know for us, we had 188 students who sat the exam, and all the necessary things were put in place for our students to ensure that they had a fair chance of doing well in the examinations. My commendation also is that special arrangements were made for students with special needs. So we had students with special needs and special accommodations were made. So we had about 4 students, and of course, the special accommodations was made for those students. So in my estimation, I think the ministry would have done an exceptional job in making sure that the students get the best possible opportunity to do well in the exams.
I think that's so important for us to highlight that this was a collaborative effort. The Ministry of Education, schools, parents, teachers coming together to make this year sitting possible. But Principal Harris, changes had to be made in order to have a uniform examination and allow for these students to even sit it this year. Performance tasks were cancelled, science and social studies were removed, the curriculum was revised. In your experience, were those adjustments sufficient to give your students a fair foundation for what they actually sat?
Yes, in most part, I think it was. I think it's a good judgment on the part of the ministry and all of us as stakeholders in ensuring that our students were not overburdened by the curriculum in its entirety, having been out of school sometimes for up to 2 to 3 weeks. And so I'm not just considering those of us who were least affected, but those schools that were affected in the West as well. So in my estimation, I really think that the ministry would have done an exceptional job in thinking about all the factors and making sure that the curriculum was tailored based on these challenges that we would have experienced. And also the exam itself, I think it was revised based on what I've gotten on the ground. The students were quite comfortable with the examination that they sat.
Michelle Russell, you are a grade 6 coordinator at St. Aloysius Primary School. Help us geolocate you here in Jamaica. Where is that school located?
So St. Aloysius Primary, we are on Duke Street, just down the road from our Parliament building.
There you go, a good place to be. We've had quite a lot of parliamentary discussions today, discussing the Senate and pieces of legislation passed. So what a good place for your kids to be. As a grade 6 coordinator, you are closest to the individual student readiness. In your honest professional assessment, were your students ready to sit a national assessment in April 2026?
Yes, we were. At St. Aloysius, we work overtime to ensure the readiness of our students. Mind you, it was a lot of sacrifice from both parents and students and teachers. We sacrificed our holidays, we sacrificed our Saturdays just to be there to meet the educational needs of the students. And I think our students did well yesterday. They came out, they were relaxed, they were confident in what they did over the 2 days. And the ministry did, as our principal said, made some accommodations for those students who had special needs. And it was a successful sitting.
It's so important that you highlighted that, because for many persons, as they're sitting and they're listening, they're saying, great, they're glad to hear that those students that you would have been in charge of would have had a good time. But the placement model this year uses a 3-year composite, grade 4, grade 5, and grade 6 scores. Some of these children also had their grade 5 year disrupted by the tail end of the pandemic.
Yes, they did.
It's a 3-year composite that includes 2 years of disruption, a fair basis on which to determine a child's high school placement that will, given how Jamaica operates, for many of them, follow them for the rest of their lives.
You know, I believe so, because bear in mind, from grade 1 to grade 3 is also considered early childhood, a part of their early childhood development. Moving over to grade 4, 5, and 6, that's where the primary work actually starts. And I think it's adequate timing for them to create that profile, educational profile, that could follow them and will follow them for the rest of their life. It's a good foundation.
I think it's so solid to say that in this time, but you're on Duke Street, Principal Harris is in St. Catherine. Have let me start with you first. Have you spoken with your counterparts in other sections of the country about how their students were faring and the conditions that they had to deal with leading up to the exams?
No, I have not really had conversations outside of Kingston with any of my counterparts, no.
Principal Harris, have you been speaking with other principals, other administrators, other teachers about what it has looked like after Hurricane Melissa to get the children back in school, get them focused, get them settled, and prepare them to take the PEP exams?
To be honest with you, we actually, Marymount as a school, took a trip down to St. Elizabeth. As a school to support one of our schools there, and we were able to see firsthand the challenges that they were experiencing. So I know it would have been difficult for them because, of course, many of the schools would have been devastated by the hurricane, and of course displaced. Many of the students were displaced. Subsequent to that, we have not had much conversation, but the first-hand view as a principal, I would have figured more or less it would have been challenging without electricity, without water, the roofs gone, and then of course phasing in students coming in and so on would have posed a challenge. So the fact that the ministry would have considered to tailor the curriculum and also to adjust the examination to meet the needs of these students or where they're at would have been commendable, because I would have been there myself to see what it was like. And we took students as well, and parents and other teachers. We went on a trip down just to lend our support as a part of our Christmas gift to one of the schools out west. So we know it would have been challenging for them. Subsequent, since the examinations, they would have passed it, they would have appreciated it. It was just yesterday, so I've not been able to reach out to that school or any other school in the west to find out how the teachers would have responded, teachers and students felt about the examination itself.
And I'm glad you said that you were able to take students, teachers and parents along so that they could appreciate not only what they were dealing with, but what other students across the country would have been dealing with as a result of the passage of Hurricane Melissa. The sittings of the PEP examinations were on Wednesday and Thursday. We're now waiting for the results. To you both, when the results come in later this year, what should policymakers be asking about those numbers rather than simply accepting them as a straightforward measure of student performance? Because this is a difficult year. Calvin Harris, to you first, and then to Michelle Russell as we close.
Well, I would have figured more or less they would have looked at the level of difficulty. They would have looked at, they would be looking at how students performed in those least affected areas versus those students who are affected out west, to do some comparisons to figure more or less whether or not the exam was balanced enough for those students. I would figure more or less even with the placement of the students, that those would have been considerations as relates to the students sitting the examination. So I know coming out of the exam, there are quite a few variables that they'll be looking at to ensure that going forward, the areas of weaknesses or the strengths will be strengthened and the areas of weaknesses would have been dealt with. But I know there will be some comparison and there should be some comparison as it relates to how the students who were least affected performed versus those students who were out west who were significantly affected.
I think that's important. Final word to you, Michelle Russell. What do you think policymakers should look at?
No, there must be serious analysis on these exam results, and as the principal said, there must be also comparison. How did the students in Kingston or the least affected areas, how did they operate, how did they score, and then compare to the ones in the areas that were affected, and then necessary adjustment must be made to accommodate those students who were affected. We have to put something in place for them, because we can't leave our children behind. We have to bring everybody up to the same standard at the same level.
So important there. Our babies sat their PEP exams on Wednesday and Thursday, but different children had different sorts of expectations around them, school situations and preparation. Glad to have had you both join us, though, to tell us what those exams looked like and to give kudos to the Ministry of Education, where they were able to make adjustments. Calvin Harris, principal of Marymount Primary, and Michelle Russell, grade 6 coordinator at St. Aloysius Primary. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight inside Lead Story. Coming up, a free medical mission in Petersfield, Westmoreland tomorrow. That's what we're talking about next inside Lead Story.
Me and the style is no scam and style me.
From the market to the farm to the office, money talk is everywhere. But are you making sense or nonsense? The Bank of Jamaica brings you common sense with BOJ. Real stories, real laughs, and real lessons to help you protect, grow, and manage your money. Mattress savings.
At least my mattress. You charge me to sleep on it.
Partner plan.
Remember last year we needed our payouts early? But Miss Pam gave it to her cousin first.
Or a sketchy loan flyer.
Electrifying deals.
See why making the right financial choices is pure common sense. Brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, empowering everyday Jamaicans one episode at a time.
Grandpa, it's 2026. You can't keep hiding all your money in every single pocket forever.
Every dream conquered is another dream gained. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction. 'Cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people them I say we are mash up the dance. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't put it down. Shine your lights
Tomorrow morning, Saturday, May 2, a free medical mission will be held at the Petersfield Primary and Infant School in Westmoreland. The event runs from 10 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. Free patient care, free medical checkups, home visits, and free transportation for those who need it. It's being organized by Serve It Forward. The frame around this mission, though, is important because Westmoreland is among the parishes most severely affected by Hurricane Melissa. Communities there are still rebuilding, and when families are in survival and reconstruction mode, health screenings are often the first things to go. Missed medication, unmonitored hypertension, diabetes management disrupted. Mental health unaddressed. But tonight we're dealing with a set of people who said not on our watch. And I'm now being joined by Dr. Aisha Simone Brown, medical doctor and Serve It Forward's Western Region medical correspondent. Good evening, Dr. Brown, and welcome to Lead Story.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Aisha Simone.
Aisha Simone.
And I'm very happy to be here.
Hi, Aisha
Yes.
Simone. Dr. Brown, in a post-hurricane environment where families are focused on rebuilding their homes, what's the specific health risk that goes unaddressed when routine medical care is repeatedly delayed?
Right. So in the wake of the worst hurricane that has hit Jamaica, the biggest risks that were posed in the immediate setting would have been the risk to health from waterborne diseases. We did have spikes of leptospirosis, the risk of a resurgence of dengue. However, in the long-term setting, when we have patients that are displaced due to lack of road access or the loss of the health centers, those patients with chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, they're out of medications for prolonged periods, and that's when we have the complications such as stroke, heart attack, and other less severe complications from those chronic illnesses. We also have the risk of spike in pregnancies, unplanned pregnancies, because of an actual surge in sometimes consensual or non-consensual sexual activity. So those are some of the risks that we had experienced and also warned about.
You worried about it, you warned about it, but you're now doing something about it. This mission is saying not only are you going to the Petersfield Primary and Infant School, you're also doing home visits, which is a great expansion for people who might not have thought of it. Which patients are you specifically trying to reach with that component? And why is facility-based care alone insufficient for those individuals that you're hoping to reach to?
Right. So what I love about the Serve It Forward mission, the entire basis of it is surrounding not losing traction with response, with hurricane response. So while others may have paused or stopped, because we're now in our 6th month post-hurricane, Serve It Forward said no. We are committed to keep showing up, keep serving, and to bring healthcare right to the people who need it. Those who are from underserved communities and those who may have been forgotten. So the most important thing about providing this accessible care is everyone deserves a right to healthcare. So we do have select home visits based on the region that we're serving or the community that we're serving at the time. And in addition to that, we do have doctors on the ground to serve at the Petersfield Primary School. This will actually be our largest turnout with 15 medics, including 2 specialist doctors, a urologist and a gynecologist. So we do have that specialist care available. And we are looking forward to serving a broad range of individuals from children all the way to the elderly, because everyone really does deserve accessible health care.
Everybody does deserve accessible health care, and you're having that tomorrow. Up on the screen is a flyer there for Serve It Forward. It's taking place tomorrow at the Petersfield Primary and Infant School. Running from 10 to 5, but you also said to people, hi, we also will try to get you there if we can, with a shuttling service, a bus being provided. Talk to us about that for those who are in the area who might need that service to be able to come and to get the benefit of the 15 doctors that you've now put together for tomorrow.
Right. So we at Serve It Forward are so grateful for our key sponsors. The key sponsor being Caribbean Cement, who we in partnership, we will be donating actually construction supplies, which would be cement and also a generator. And we will be, our partner for transportation is actually Knoxford Express. So that would be the shuttle method. And we're so grateful for the partnership, because in addition to the doctors, it is not just a medical doctor team. We have support teams. We do have nurses. We have 2 pharmacists. We even have 5 medical students. Everything is really bridging the gap. And we're so grateful to have additional support volunteers who are responsible for the community engagement side of things, because we're not just focusing on healthcare, but also the holistic health, which targets mental health and engaging persons in activities, dance, songs, and just getting to talk to someone, because after all that trauma, sometimes all people need is a listening ear.
They need that listening ear. They're going to get it thanks to the very comprehensive setup that it looks like you'll be having tomorrow at the Petersfield Primary and Infant School in Westmoreland. Is there anything that people need to sign up for? Do they need to get there early to sign up for the shuttle, for the bus? Do they need to do anything in order to take advantage of this free medical mission tomorrow?
So we have been spreading the word, and the best thing I would recommend is to really come out early, because we have seen some missions where we've been to St. James. So we've supported communities of Cambridge, Salt Spring, and Trelawney. We went to Wakefield and D-Side. We've even made it to Bull Bay. And those communities, we've seen an influx of patients, and sometimes the word does not spread to the more inward sections of the community. So we do have an influx in the mid to late afternoon, and based on the travel time, because half of our team will be traveling from Kingston, so they would need to leave the area at a reasonable time. So my recommendation really would be to come out early because we want to serve as many people as we can. That is our entire mission.
Well, I do hope that you're able to execute that mission tomorrow as you have the medical mission there at the Petersfield Primary and Infant School in Westmoreland. Dr. Aisha Simone Brown, thank you so much for joining us inside Lead Story.
Sorry, thank you so much for having us. And as we grow, I would really love to implore those who are interested in sponsoring and partnering with us. You can find more information on our website at serveitforwardja.com or on Instagram at serveitforwardja. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much for joining us. Now, remember, tomorrow, Westmoreland surrounding communities Serving Forward will be there to be able to assist you to get the help that is much needed. Let's take a wrap-up of the week, you see, because at the end of this all, this is our week in review. And this week generated more than news. It generated a pattern. So let's trace it. In Jamaica's House of Representatives, the NAR Bill passed at 1:30 in the morning after a marathon sitting that saw the mace, the symbol of parliamentary authority, dislodged from its position by a member of the opposition during a heated clause-by-clause debate. The member has since acknowledged, that's Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, that her action breached parliamentary procedure. The speed of the bill's passage and the temperature of the debate, however, tells us something about what is at stake. In that same parliament this week, the Senate, the Cybercrimes Amendment Act, passed today without a single amendment. From committee stage to third reading in one sitting, it is now law. On the same day, Senator Bernard called for mandatory body-worn cameras for police, a discussion that has been raging now for about a week and a half and even longer in Jamaica. The legislature enacted a new cybercrime framework and in the same breath identified a gap in the enforcement infrastructure required to implement it. In Jamaica's Constitutional Court on Wednesday, a three-judge panel, not yesterday or Wednesday, yesterday, delivered a unanimous ruling. The 2000